Voorzitter van die solidariteitsbeweging, ja. Ja. Ja, goed. Reg. Maar ons gaan oor die vakbonde praat, né? Ja. Ja. Goed. Okay, Mark Marie. Mark Marie. Sal ons die links doen? Ja. Wat is my kamera? Daai ene. So ek sal so. Ja, okay. Ja. Goed. Kom ons kry net klank. Kan ons klank kry asseblief? Okay, is dit reg? Jy het dit in die saal op? Nee. Is in die saal op. Goed. Okay, jy gaan nou rol, nee, ek sal vir jou cue, okay? Kan ons as die gaste, dames en here, kan ons die gaste net vra? Ons het 'n redelike televisieproduksie aan die gang hierso. Dit is 2 opnames wat terselfdertyd gedoen word deur 2 verskillende spanne en 'n derde span wat ook nou opgedaag het. So ek moet net terwille van redigering later, moet ek net vinnig 2 stukkies sê in die kamera. So as julle vir 'n oomblik net bietjie kan stil wees, sal ek bly wees. Julle hoef nie ophou asemhaal of so iets nie, maar net nie vreeslik gesels of so nie. So ek sal dit vinnig doen en dan sal ons nou begin met die uitsending self en met die bespreking. Is jy reg? Rol jy? Goed. Ons onderbreek vir 'n wyle en ons is nou terug net na die handelsnuus. Ons is terug en ons gesels oor die toekoms van die vakbondwese. Kom ons gesels. Okay. Happiness. Klaar? Dankie. Goed. Ons span maar weer. Nog so 'n paar minute. En ons wag natuurlik nog vir meneer Wawie. Hy haas om hier na toe, so hoop hy. Is hy. Fantasties. Ja, wat jy net sê hoe. Ja. Ja. Nog net gemake-up, nee. Mark Marie, jy moet sê wanneer ons moet begin, né? Ja. As hy reg is, dan moet hy maar kom sit aan my kos. Hy kan sy koffie saambring. Hello, how are you?
Are you okay?
Yeah, good. Good to see
Are you okay?
you. I'm Peter Leroux. He's a labor lawyer.
Good, good. Right here.
The right there. That's fine.
You're not on my list. I don't think you can work.
Are you good?
Ja, nee, gaan gerust aan. How's it?
What a dream.
Okay, and just to tell you guys is that the first 20 minutes or so will be a recording for our program on Sunday on television. And after that, it will be a longer discussion. So I'll try to get it moving in the first 20 minutes, but then after that, we'll take it easier and have longer time to really formulate and so on. But the first 20 minutes is going to be go. Okay. Dis 'n uur en 'n half van die geheel, né? Goed. So daarna vat ons hom maar weet rustig. Moenie te veel worry daaroor nie. Solank ek net in die eerste 20 minute 'n duidelike aanduiding kry. Goed. Wel, wanneer jy reg is, kan ons begin, né? En daar is my kamera, né? Goed. Ja.
politiek verwachtings geskep waaraan die ekonomie nie aan kan voldoen nie. Ons eie siening is dat die vakbond nie met die partypolitiek betrokke moet wees nie, dat die vakbond moet fokus op die belange van sy lede en eerder moet kyk om hulle omstandighede te verbeter as om te probeer om in die politieke rol te speel. Ons dink dit is die taak van politieke partye.
Maar jy het nou self gesê in jou verklaring oor hierdie parallelle regering wat jy tot stand wil bring, is dat
Dit is nie aan ons verklaring gewees.
O, dit was uit die koerantopskrif geweest. So is dit 'n leuen.
Nee, wat ons sê is dat ons kan nie net alles aan die staat oorlos. Dit is die kern van wat ons gesê het, is dat daar moet selfstandige instellings tot stand kom waar dan dienste lewer wat die staat nie kan of wil doeltreffend lewer. Om 'n voorbeeld te noem, dit help nie ons dink daar gaan 'n tyd kom waar die staat alles vir almal kan doen. Want 'n staat wat sterk genoeg is om alles vir almal te kan doen, is ook sterk genoeg om alles vir almal te kan wegvat. Want wat jy vir een ou gee, moet jy iets van die ander al wegvat. So vir ons gaan dit oor selfstandigheid, ons mobiliseer gemeenskappe en ons sal byvoorbeeld eerder ons eie tegniese kollege oprig, ons sal byvoorbeeld eerder, soos wat ons vir die help aan die hand gedoen het, skole ondersteuningssentrum stig om skoolkinders te ondersteun met noodvoeding, met skryfbehoeftes, met hulp aan onderwysers en so 'n ondersteunende rol speel, as wat ons dan nou sal of in die partypolitiek betrokke raak, of nou, soos jy nou stel, op die parallelle regering stel.
Maar dit is nog mense, jou lede, wat bly binne in Suid-Afrika, wat stemreg het, wat tydens 'n verkiesing moet stem of nie stem nie.
Ja, daarom
Gaan jy vir hulle aanbevelings doen?
ja, ons gaan vir hulle aanbeveling doen, naamlik dat hulle moet stem, maar ons gaan nie inmeng met hulle demokratiese keuse nie. Ons het lede wat uit verskillende partye bestaan. Ons is 'n beweging van meer as 300,000 mense wat elkeen hulle volwasse genoeg is om hulle eie besluite te neem. Ons sal vir hulle dan inligting gee, maar op die einde sal ons hulle moet wel deelneem, maar dat hulle eie besluite moet neem.
Pieter Leroux, jy is nou betrokke in die onderhandelings. Vind jy dat dan die praktiese situasie, daar waar julle met mekaar sit en dinge uitstoei, dat politieke al groter rol begin speel?
Ek is nie seker of dit politiek is nie, maar dat is seker dat mededinging om die belange van die werknemers te probeer behartig. Jy sien dit nou in die loononderhandelings in die goudmynbedryf waar 3 vakbonde geskik het met seker van die werkgewers, maar 1 vakbond buite kan kom. Dit maak dit geweldig moeilik vir 'n werkgewer om te beplan vir die toekoms en om dinge te reël. So ek weet nie of dit 'n ideologiese beklemtoning het op werksvloervlak nie, maar dit is mededinging om die belange van die werknemers, om voordele te kry vir die werknemers wat dan weer hulle ondersteuning sal verbeter as het ware.
Maar kyk, die vakbondwese in Suid-Afrika van die 80er jare af met die Wian-kommissie het die hervorming soort van 'n rol gespeel binne die politiek van Suid-Afrika. Van 94 af het ons gesien dat Kusatu byvoorbeeld homself geskaar het in die alliansie saam met die ANC en die Suid-Afrikaanse Kommunistiese Party. Maar nou lyk die dinge asof dit 'n bietjie gaan verander. Is dit soos jy dit sien?
Ek dink dit gaan verander. Op werksvlak, op die prakties alledaagse vlak, ek dink gaan dit veroorsaak dat daar meer mededinging, meer konflik op die werksplek is. Daar gaan meer stakings wees en ek kan nog klaar sien. En daar gaan meer friksie of wryding wees tussen vakbonde as hulle begin onderhandel of net op alledaagse interaksie op die werksplek. Jy sien dit elke dag.
Mr. Vawe, but politically speaking, you must be unhappy as you're sitting there.
I am extremely unhappy, and I've made that absolutely very clear to every South African to know. I can't be happy. South Africa is facing 4 challenges that I honestly believe are catastrophic. The first one being that of unemployment, sitting at a record 35% as we speak, with 50 to 60% of our youth unemployed, with everybody unemployed in structural unemployment, meaning that 60% of people unemployed have not been employed in the past 5 years or for the rest of their lives, with 35% of workers in casual labor or involved in atypical forms of job, with wages suppressed, and 50% of South African workers earning below 3,033 rands, meaning that 60% of working South Africans are trapped in poverty. And I can't be happy. Secondly, I can't be happy that South Africa have deteriorated from being one of the most unequal societies in the world to be the most unequal society in the world in the first 21 years of democracy. I can't be happy when you see a situation where the rich is getting much richer and the poor is getting much more poorer. And thirdly, I can't be happy with the levels of poverty in our society. As you know, a staggering 54% of the population is living in poverty. That's just using one measure from government. But if you use another measure, people say it's up to 63% of people trapped in poverty. 14 million South Africans go to bed every night without anything to eat, and another 14 million is facing hunger. And that's a crisis. And the fourth challenge is that of corruption, which is totally running out of hand, with every statistics that you see, both from the public sector and the private sector, showing that we are facing a crisis that if we don't stop it now, we may face a bleak future for our country and for our children. And so I'm not happy politically. I just want to make that absolutely clear. Unless those indications begin to face a different direction, unless we begin to handle or to have a handle of the unemployment, poverty, and inequalities and corruption, we can't be happy.
But how are you going to handle that? How are you going to address it?
Political will. And
politically?
Well, absolutely. Political
but how?
Will.
Through a party? Through pressure?
Everybody in South Africa have a role to play. Every citizen must learn that nothing happens automatically. Everything requires active citizenship, to be on the ball and to stop complaining whilst they are on their laurels, to be in the streets, to be in the boardrooms, to be in the school boards, to be in the hospital boards, to be in the ward committees in terms of the councils, to put pressure on the powers that be to do the right thing.
Flip, maar wat 'n rol sien jy dan van solidariteit, wat eintlik 'n redelike eksklusiewe soort van 'n beweging, maar ook 'n vakbond is, wat fisies moet sit, daar saam met Pieter de Roere, wat moet sit en onderhandel oor regte. Sien jy 'n veranderde rol spesifiek vir solidariteit ook?
Ja, baie beslis. Weet, 'n suksesvolle land het 3 suksesvolle sektore nodig. 'n Suksesvolle staatssektor, 'n privaat sektor en 'n gemeenskapssektor. En ons sit in die staatssektor met baie groot probleme. Ons sit met 'n staat wat, alhoewel hy nog ver van verval af is, genadiglik, is daar al groot dele van die staat wat verval het. Deur 'n swak regering, deur korrupsie, deur wanbestuur. Ons sit met baie staatshospitale, baie polisiestasies, baie openbare skole wat verval het. En dan rus dit baie swaarder op die ander 2 bene van die samelewing, naamlik die privaat sektor en die gemeenskapssektor, om eintlik dan 'n groter rol te moet speel. Natuurlik moet mense daaraan werk, ook op politieke vlak, sodat die staat meer doeltreffend raak, maar dit is nie so maklik nie. Ons siening in kort is dat die taak van 'n staat in die breë is die van 'n huishoudster en nie van 'n broodwinner nie. Ons glo dat op die einde is die privaat sektor die lokomotief van die ekonomie en nie die staat nie. Die rol van vakbonde is om te sorg dat hulle lede se aandeel in die groeiende ekonomie dan toeneem, dat hulle behoorlik vergoed word, dat hulle nie uitgebuit word nie, maar bykomend daarbij het ons by die solidariteit en die solidariteit beweging besluit dat ons sal moet sorg dat ons breër betrokke raak, byvoorbeeld in 'n ondersteunende rol op die gebied van onderwys, dat ons die onderwysunie bystaan, dat ons die onderwys beheerliggame bystaan, dat ons die skole bystaan om te sorg dat kinders 'n goeie onderwys kry. Ons het op die opleidingsvlak betrokke geraak, omdat ons siening in kort is. Die probleme rondom werkloosheid en armoede en ongelykheid is 'n weerspieëling van die swak onderwys en van die swak opleiding in die land. Daar is eintlik hoeveel van ons skole wat eintlik mense onindiensneembaar maak en dit kan nie dan werk omdat hulle 'n behoorlike werk in die arbeidsmark kry nie. Ons vier hierdie week wêreldwyd die goeie werk, decent work. Dit is wat eintlik vandag gevier word, maar ons sit in die praktyk dat mense is nie by 'n vlak opgelei waar hulle ordentlike werk het om vir hulle self te kan sorg om vir hulle 'n behoorlike lewensstandaard te kan verseker.
Pieter, as jy sit en onderhandel. Goed. Ja, alright, ons hou net vir 'n oomblik vas, dat ons net kyk of hierdie klankprobleme kan uitsorteer. Sonny, gee vir my 'n mikrofoon. Gee vir my 'n mikrofoon, dan praat ek sommer so. Is die gaste? Goed. Of sal ons, is dit net meneer Wawie of die ander klank ook? Okay. Was Louis? Oh. Usually once a year. That's right. So Art and Cultural Music Festival once a year.
Ja, is alles gereed naar liefde. Ja, maar dis wat ek nou van check.
Marie, jy is happy met wat die aangegaan het. As jy nou sit en gesels daarson, dan sien jy AMCO aan die een kant wat baie polities ingestel is op 'n sekere manier en teen die ander vakbonde is. Dan het jy die wegbreek vakbonde, dan het jy COSATU en dan het jy nog 'n vakbond soos Solidariteit ook. Jy sê jy kry seker verskillende dinamika, verskillende boodskappe, so terwyl jy daar sit vir 'n werkgewer raak dit moeilik.
Ja, dit maak dit inderdaad moeiliker. Die feit dat daar meer as een vakbond is nie 'n probleem nie, maar as daar meer as een mededingende vakbond is vir 'n sekere groep werknemers, dis waar die probleem ontstaan.
Is die mededinging net op grond van lidmaatskap of gaan dit verder?
Dit is lidmaatskap, myns insiens, op my ervaring is dit lidmaatskap, maar daarachter is daar miskien 'n
politieke oriëntasie.
Ja.
Maar sien jy dit uitspeel voor jouself, né?
Ek sien dit uitspeel, of ons sien dit uitspeel in verskillende benaderings oor lone veral, jy weet. En dit gaan oor ekonomiese mededinging in my insiens op hierdie stadium. Op die vlak van meneer Wawie, miskien gaan dit oor politiek en oor ideologie, maar op die werksvlak sien ek dit nie as 'n ideologiese ding per se nie. Dit word meer ekonomiese bekleierery of mededinging. Wie kan die beter lone kry? Wie kan meer invloed hê op die werkgewer? Ek het er nog nie gesien dat uitgesproke ideologiese benaderinge uitkom daar nie. Onderliggend miskien, maar nie dit word nie dit gaan oor lone en benefits soos hulle sê meeste mense.
But in practice, Mr. Barbie, there's no doubt about it that Mr. Irvin Jim, certainly as the General Secretary of NUMSA, and other people in the breakaway or the rebel movements are saying that we want socialism, radical socialism. Is that what you want as well?
I think Peter is right, and in fact Flip made this point earlier. The trade union movement naturally will belong to different schools of thought when it comes to both political orientation and or ideological orientation. We all have our beliefs. Some of us are hardcore socialists. Some of us believe in the system of capitalism as a starting and departure point.
What are you?
I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist to the core. And I believe in fairness, in justice, and I believe in the common good for all the people of the world. I hate domination of any group by any group. I hate a system that is based on the extreme exploitation of the majority by a small minority. I'm a socialist. I believe in education, in healthcare, in public goods, in public transport for all citizens. I believe in a state that is strong, developmental, and active, that can act in the best interest of society as a whole, as against the interest of the owners of production. I'm a socialist. And Flip is not. And I respect that he is not, but I do embrace the fact that there is other issues in common between the two of us. For example, on the 30th of September, we marched together in Pretoria to the union buildings and in Cape Town, because all of us are concerned about the scourge of corruption in South Africa. We both identify that as a threat to our future. So in relation to those issues, we will act together. And the Solidarity was one of the organizations that responded to our invitations to start a conversation amongst the leaders and the membership about the Workers' Summit. And we're working together in relation to seeing whether we can do certain things and agree on basic concepts together and in the trade union movement. So yes, there will always be ideological and political differences amongst unions. But I do believe that the unions must be about the protection of the jobs of workers. If we agree on that, there's a potential that we can work together. That there should be fairness and that wages must be fair. We believe, all of us, in that. We can work together in relation to that. That workers must be trained so that they can climb the ladder in each and every workplace so that they can better and improve the lives of their children and society. We agree on that. We will work together. So there's a lot of things in common that we must recognize instead of always getting the ho-ho of political and ideological differences and then running away from one another as if we're not living in the same country.
Flip, maar dit moet toch seker moeilik wees vir julle verteenwoordigers as jy nou tussen daai verskillende mense sit en julle verskil radikaal van mekaar polities of in julle ingesteldheid ten opsigte van beleid. Nie noodwendig soos wat meneer Wawie verduidelik het in terme van praktiese dinge soos lone en voordele en so. Byvoorbeeld die persoonlike dinamika, net om langs 'n ou te sit wat eintlik wrevel het in jou standpunt.
Ja. Ek dink die groot verskil is ekonomies. Ons sit baie keer ons mense soos jy nou sê in die onderhandelingstafel langs mense wat baie sterk sosialisties voel, terwyl ons voel dat die vrye markstelsel met sy gebreke is die enigste stelsel wat genoeg welvaart vir almal in die land kan skep. Maar dan moet vakbonde 'n rol speel om daardie welvaart dan meer regverdig te verdeel. Alhoewel ons dus beleidsverskil het, is daar belangeooreenkomste, soos wat meneer Wawie nou uitgelig het. In baie belangrike dinge soos die krisis rondom korrupsie in Suid-Afrika, want ons sit met 'n land wat besig is, en as jy kyk na al die internasionale studies, al die indekse, as jy kyk na die sakevertroue wat die laagste is sedert 1994, as jy kyk na die wêreldmededingendheidsverslae, word korrupsie keer op keer genoem as een van die groot krisispunte in Suid-Afrika. En op gebiede soos daardie kan ons saamwerk. Ons wil ook baie graag help. Ons het byvoorbeeld al aangebied in die verlede en ons het dit al gedoen om 'n tegniese kollege te stig om te help om ongeskoolde mense op te lei en sodat hulle kan 'n behoorlike opleiding kry, 'n behoorlike salaris kry, want ons is reeds bekommerd oor baie maatskappye wat baie min spandeer aan opleiding. Ons is baie bekommerd oor die gehalte van die staat se opleiding. En dis waar ons sê dat vakbonde sal teen wil en dank, ons leef nie in Switserland nie, ons is in Suid-Afrika in 'n staat wat ontwikkel. En ons sal moet 'n rol speel om te sorg dat mense beter opgelei is, want ek wil ook nie in 'n onderste posvlak vir my lewe lank sit en geen kans om in jou loopbaan te vorder nie. En die enigste wat jou daaruit kan kry, dink ons, is opleiding, en ons dink nie wette gaan jou daaruit kry van die staat se kant af nie. Ons dink vakbonde moet 'n baie groter rol speel om te sorg dat mense bemagtig word deur goeie opleiding, deur ontwikkeling, sodat hulle 'n ordentlike werk kan kry om weet goed vir hulle gesinne te kan sorg.
Pieter, nou wat dink jy binne die werkgewersomgewing, wat moet verander wat prakties kan bydra tot beter verhoudinge, miskien binne die onderhandelingssituasie, maar ook in die breë samelewing van Suid-Afrika?
Wel, ek dink dit is geweldig moeilik om in die opsigte. Ons werkgewers en die vakbonde, ons ding weer met oorsese markte deesdae. So die spanning en die druk word meer en meer vererg deur die feit dat ons probeer, of die gemeenskap met buitelandse werkgewers, buitelandse vakbonde met onder meer ding oor lone en daai tipe van goed. So die spanninge daar word vererger deur spanninge wat van oorsee ingevoer word, deur die globalization, soos hulle sê. Maar belangriker is dit, soos hulle meneer Wawie en meneer Wyspraat, op daai vlak kom die mense redelik goed mee klaar. Maar my probleem is, hoe word dit op die werksvlak weer verspeel? En daar is gevalle, en dit is nie ongewone gevalle nie, die mening tot geweld lei, tot intimidasie lei, en dis waar die werkgewers die probleem het. Hoe beheer jy dit? En so die samewerking daarbo kan moontlik plaasvind, maar hieronder waar die mening oor life and death goed gaan, dis waar my probleem is. Dis waar die probleme ontstaan vir 'n werkgewer in elk geval.
Well, let's ask Mr. Wawie. The problem that we have that often workers' action also will entail some kind of violence. How can we put an end to that?
When we were in COSATU, we once commissioned a study on the workers' behavior, in particular during the strikes. And we were shocked to get information through that research that revealed to us that more than 50% of workers in South Africa believes that without violence, employers will never listen. And the same study was commissioned by SWAP, the University of Witwatersrand. And it also confirmed that ordinary South Africans simply believes that unless you burn a tire and unless there's some smoke, unless there's some violence, the mayor, the councillor, the minister, the premier will never ever listen to you. That's a psyche of a nation that is extremely dangerous and must be discouraged, because then it feeds into a society that embraces violence. If you look at the statistics that were issued by the police last week, it's absolutely entrenching that belief that everything can be solved through violent behavior. We have a society at war with itself. 49 people in South Africa get killed violently every day in our republic. And so all of us have a responsibility to root out that culture of violence in our society. Our crime is extremely violent. We're not just dealing with the high rates of crime. We're dealing with a very specialized South African phenomenon of rape, of brutal torture, of that associated with break-ins, of violent strike actions, of burning tires, instead of us having peaceful demonstrations and so forth. It's a societal problem. It's as much of a trade union as it is everybody else's problem in the country. And we've got to work together to ensure that we build a future of a society not believing that you can only solve the problems and get listened to if you turn violent.
Wat is jou standpunt rondom die geweldskultuur?
Ek wil heeltemal saamstem. Ek dink dit is 'n baie groot krisis. Dit is ook hoekom ons genoodsaak is om saam met die polisie, saam met sekuriteitsmaatskappye en buurtwagte gemeenskapsveiligheidsprojekte te loods om mense te beskerm, maar die kern van die probleem dink ek is die kwessie van waardes en ons instellings wat waardes moet oordra, soos die skole, soos die regering, soos die media, soos die kerke, maar spesifiek die gesinne, is in 'n baie groot krisis in die land. En ons sit met 'n leierskapprobleem, nasionale leierskapprobleem in die land wat nie die waardes het wat mense opkyk na nie, maar dit help nie net om vir hulle te wag nie. Mense moet kyk na elkeen van hierdie instellings wat waardes oordra. En ons sal moet, en daar stem ek heeltemal saam met meneer Wawe, dit sal 'n internasionale projek wees om waardes weer by mense te laat posvat, sodat hulle weet hoe jy 'n probleem oplos. Daar gaan altyd verskille tussen mense wees, daar gaan altyd selfs konflik wees. Maar die hele vraagstuk gaan oor hoe om dit op 'n ordentlike manier op te los.
Goed, baie dankie aan die drie van julle, groot waardering. Ek wil graag hê ons moet miskien nou vir ons gaste vra dat julle begin deelneem aan die gesprek. Die eerste gedeelte van die gesprek was deel van 'n opname wat ons ook gedoen het vir televisie, maar nou gaan ons nog verder aan met die internet en ons gesprek in die algemeen. So julle is welkom om vrae te vra. Daar is mikrofone en ek hoop daai mikrofone werk sodat ons die standpunte kan hoor van, nie standpunte, nie vrae kan hoor asseblief van ons gaste. Julle is baie welkom om enigeen van die drie te vra. Maak net baie duidelik, sê wie jy is, vir wie jy die vraag wil vra, en kort en kragtig dan die vraag asseblief. And by all means, can I ask the three of you, if you want to interact or you want to add, by all means, please do so. Goed, is daar van julle wat vrae wil vra? Ons het net vinnig die eerste gedeelte afgehandel, so daar is nog soveel ander dinge wat ek self oor kon vra, maar kom ons los dit daarso en ons gee vir julle die geleentheid om deel te neem. So is daar enige vrae wat hier uit die gehoor uitkom?
Is daar enige antwoorde?
Ja. Die moet julle gee. Daar heel and right at the back, thank you. We hope the sound problems are resolved now and that
my name is Shaheen Khan from the United Front. Comrade Vavi, the question of the NUMSA moment, I think you've been a bit coy about it because it involves the building of a united front, a workers' party, and a new workers' federation. Can you elucidate a bit more on that, please?
Shall we keep that for a moment? Can we have one or two more and then enige iemand anders wat 'n vraag wil vra? Ja. Right here in front, net hier so voor asseblief. Daniela.
There is a question on Twitter from at Marnus Breed to you, Mr. Wavi. He says, I think you kind of addressed it, but he specifically asks, would you consider leading a new workers' party?
Well, Mr. Wavi, let's hear from you.
Let me start by answering the question from the United Front right at the back about what does this NUMSA moment means. In brief, NUMSA makes an assessment about the first 20 years of democracy. And it says in its National Congress, Special National Congress convened in December 2013, that from how they are viewing the events politically and economically, the main beneficiaries of transformation in South Africa has not been the working class, be they white or black. It has been to the benefit of the owners of property, the property class. It is they who have more to celebrate from the 20 years of democracy than the people that democracy and transformation was intended to benefit. So that's the starting point. And they say so because of the figures that I've already mentioned, the extraordinary levels of unemployment that are not getting better. That's the starting point. Unemployment in South Africa is getting worse. And anybody who says something else to the contrary is in absolute denial. The second point, they say, inequalities are getting even bigger. In particular, income inequalities are getting worse. We're sitting with the title of being the #1 most unequal society in the world, yet we're celebrating 20 years of democracy. They make an assessment that poverty is getting out of hand. with extraordinary numbers of people simply trapped in structural poverty. And they say this is not to the benefit of workers, and that's why they believe that COSATU must step out of the tripartite alliance and be an independent voice of workers. And secondly, they say that in their view, the time for a workers' party cannot be postponed, it's now. And thirdly, they say they need a unity between the workers' organizations and civil society organizations to pursue transformation and to reject neoliberalism or neoliberal approaches to development. And so they're stepping and they're moving ahead on that basis. In fact, they got into trouble with all of those conclusions in COSATU, and they were fired for holding a different political view to the rest of the leadership in the Federation. I got fired for saying that workers should not be dismissed for holding a different political view to other workers and in society, unless you're now developing unions to be just pure political organs instead of the prime organs of the workers' voice in the workplace.
But what are you working towards? He said you are coy. So the specific question is...
I don't want to declare that I'm ready to lead the workers' front or a new workers' front, or we're ready now to move into a new political or a new federations and so forth. I believe, I'm a Democrat up to the core. I'm not a coward, but I'm a Democrat to the core. Those issues are issues that ordinary workers in the streets will decide on. It's not going to take some declaration from a clever black somewhere who will then say, this is now the route to go. Workers involved in their daily struggles, whether against corruption, or today is the International Day on Decent Work, or for decent work, and fighting against casualization for better wages, and for access to clean running water everywhere and electricity. Out of those struggles, workers will decide that, no, at this stage, we need a new federation, we need a new workers' party, and we need to embark on these struggles in this following way.
But you want a stronger state. You already said so because you are pro-socialism. Therefore, you want a stronger state.
And currently, we have an absolutely very weak state in disarray.
Now, how can you change it if you don't change it politically?
That's a question that everybody must ask and answer.
Let's ask you.
Not one individual. We have a very weak state that is unable to lead industrialization of South Africa. We're seeing deindustrialization. We're seeing one of the sectors that we had always hoped will lead economic growth in South Africa simply dissipating in our hands. We need a change at the policy level. That's why I said there is policy instruments within the government, in the ANC, about what needs to happen. There's an EPAP, there's a new growth path, and there's a myriad of other policies that are in place. But we don't have consistent push at the leadership to ensure that we implement that, precisely because I think that we're getting diverted by who's going to be the leader, who's going to be the general secretary, who's going to be this and that, instead of focusing on what matters to South Africans.
But it's nothing strange to have a Labour Party, as we have in Britain, for instance, and the Labour Party there is in the ascent, and you know about the changes there. They want a stronger and a harder socialist kind of state for Britain. So why don't you do the same here in South Africa?
In the context of the crisis that we've already articulated, poverty, unemployment, inequality, and corruption, it is simply not a crime or a betrayal of anybody to think about a future where there will be a workers' party in South Africa moving forward. It's not a betrayal of anybody. Instead, a lot of people, including in the United Front, think that that would be absolutely revolutionary to do that and to pursue that goal at this particular moment. But of course, the defenders of the status quo will condemn me to hell tonight and every day for even suggesting that it is not betrayal to think about a future led by a workers' party in South Africa.
Flip, jy wil reageer?
Ja, ek dink dit sal baie goed wees as daar 'n werkersparty tot stand kom. Ek dink dit sal die demokrasie in Suid-Afrika versterk. Ek dink dit sal baie goed wees. Wat ek wel oor bekommerd is dat ons oorskat die rol en die vermoë van 'n staat om aan dinge soos armoede en ongelykheid aandag te gee. Die staat het wel 'n vermoë, maar die staat kan nie alles doen nie. Meneer Wawie was, as ek dit nou in my taal kan sê, die slagoffer van die zoomifikasie van Suid-Afrika, waar in plaas van om 'n land deur sy instellings, soos wetgewers, parlemente, openbare instellings en so meer te regeer, word 'n staat regeer deur 'n netwerk van persoonlike politieke kontakte. En mense wat nie daarmee saamstem nie, word uitgeskuif. En ek dink dit is ondemokraties. En nou sit ons, soos hy gesê het, met 'n swakker wordende staat, met 'n swak staat, maar ons sit met 'n sterker regering. En ek dink dis die swakste kombinasie wat jy kan kry, 'n regering wat vir homself mag bymekaar maak om sy wil af te dwing, maar daar's 'n groeiende gaping tussen wat die regering wil doen en wat die staat kan doen. So armoede moet aangespreek word. Die vraag is net, hoe kan dit aangespreek word? In my siening is dit gaan ongelukkig nie deur 'n staat kan gebeur nie. Daar's geen staat in die wêreld wat vir al die mense kan sorg nie. Ons sit met 'n probleem dat sosialisme baie keer wil mense sosialisme hê in lande waar dit ekonomies gesproke nie kan werk nie, terwyl in lande waar dit spreekwoordelik kan werk, dit nie meer nodig is nie. Maar selfs ons westerse welsynstate sit wêreldwyd in 'n probleem. Die markekonomie, dink ek, is iets wat ons moet bevorder, saam met die rol van vakbonde om daai teenwig te wees, want as jy dit net los vir die mark, dan kry jy die uitbuiting wat ons op baie van die plekke sien. Maar ons moet, ek sien nie besighede is die vyand nie, natuurlik het mens baie keer konflik met 'n bepaalde bestuur, maar besighede skep werk. Hulle verskaf die produkte wat die land nodig het, die dienste wat die land nodig het. Hulle ontwikkel die land, hulle betaal belasting. Weet hulle help dat mense op die einde kan huise hê en mediese fondse en so meer en so meer. So wat die rol van vakbonde inkom is om te sorg dat dit nie totaal aan die ander kant weer gaan dat partymaatskappy hoofde wat ons al in die verlede gehad het, terwyl dat duisende mense afgedank word, dan vat hulle vir hulle self hierso 30-40 miljoen rand bonusse in. En dit diskrediteer eintlik die stelsel waarin ek glo. So al wat ek voorpleit is balans, maar ek sê weer, ons moet nie die rol van die staat enige plek in die wêreld oorskat nie. Die privaat sektor en die gemeenskapssektor het wat my betref 'n baie meer deurslaggewende rol om te speel. 'n Skool wat doeltreffend werk, 'n college wat doeltreffend werk, 'n universiteit wat goed bestuur word, wat studente met uitnemende kwalifikasies lewer, het 'n baie groter rol in die oplossing van armoede as wat enige nuwe wet het wat jy gaan implementeer om dit te probeer doen.
Maar dit is so dat in Suid-Afrika tradisioneel gesien moet daar 'n verhouding wees soos 'n netlek tussen die werkgewers, die regering en die vakbonde. En ons het gekry met meneer Ramatlodi byvoorbeeld, dat daar die persepsie was dat daar 'n nader beweging is van die drie sektore aan mekaar en dat ons by 'n oplossing uitkom. Nou, wat is die situasie? Kry jy die indruk dat met hierdie verskywing in die kabinet dat ons 'n probleem het wat dit betref?
Wel, dit is 'n baie interessante vraag daai. Ek dink as ek nou kyk wat by Netlek tans gebeur, word dit eintlik gelei die onderhandelaars daar, maar daar's 'n committee of principles daarbo, soos hulle sê. En die leidende rol daar lyk vir my word gespeel, en is nou tweedehandse kennis deur meneer Ramaphosa meer as iemand anders. En die indruk wat ek kry van tweedehandse inligting is dat vir die eerste keer in baie jare Netlek tot 'n mate weer werk. Dit is interessant, ten spyte van wat u sê. En die wrywing is dit
omdat hy daar is.
Ja, omdat daar leiding is en die staat 'n bietjie meer leiding gee. En ek wil hom aansluit by meneer Wawie. Ek het geen probleem met sy analise van wat die probleem in ons land is nie. En ek wil saamstem met u daarom dat ek weet nie of ons staat of die gesag van die staat doeltreffend genoeg is om oplossings te bied nie op hierdie stadium nie. En dit sal belangriker wees op die Netlek tipe van onderhandelings waar besigheid en vakbonde kan saamwerk. Ten spyte van die spanninge binne die vakbondbedryf om daai dinge op te los.
Mr. Wawie?
One of the things that I'm beginning to feel stronger and stronger about in South Africa as a strategic direction is something that I've called a need for a cultural revolution, the change of the mindset that must start with each and every family in South Africa. A conversation that must start between the adults in the home base and with their children who we're going to leave South Africa in their hands in terms of its future.
But
about
towards what? What specifically should
exactly.
happen?
That's about this mindset change will require that we must have a conversation about what do we think is in the best interest of all South Africans. A conversation about exactly what should be the role of trade unions 21 years into democracy with the unemployment rate, poverty, inequality, corruption as we see it. What is that the unions should be doing about that? A conversation about what is the role of business today, 21 years down the line, in the light of the fact that they are involved in something that we usually call a investment strike, where they are shipping away billions and billions out of the South Africa's economy in the activity usually called the illicit cash outflows, putting it outside when we're so desperately in need of those billions to create jobs in South Africa. What should be the role of every council in terms of infrastructure and building a new culture? What should be the role of ordinary people? And how do we go back to the basic tenets of any society, the rule of law, for example? Can we at some point say, all of us, a pedestrian crossing is a pedestrian crossing. A robot or traffic light is a traffic light. Speed limits matters.
There are speed limits, of course.
But speed limit matter. There should be no exception of trade unions waking up late and rushing to the airport early in the morning and then got themselves in the wrong side of the law. And I think that that's the conversation that we need in the country. Without that mindset change, and we're going into one direction, failed state, kleptocratic democracy ruled by the most powerful groups of thugs who are able to shut the society by killing opponents and other people they're competing with for tender. And this moment I've been thinking about is that perhaps we lost the golden opportunity we had right from 1994 when we had one leader so loved, so respected, not only in South Africa, across the world. And I think that he did well to foster reconciliation between races. But one of the things that I think we missed was to use that stature to say that South Africa should return back to the rule of law and for every citizen to know that they have a role in ensuring that we have an orderly South Africa where everybody knows that I have a role to play and that there is going to be nothing for mahala, and I'm not going to wait for a manna to fall from heavens on the basis of my historic backgrounds, and that all of us must put the shoulder on the wheel to get South Africa moving forward. And I think we do need that at some point to have a specific campaign about South Africa and what we need to do in order to move out of the hole that we are seeing, that we may be walking deeper and deeper into.
Quickly, two questions. In social media, there's all sorts of talks that you and Mr. Malema are together planning a coup. Is that true?
I don't have the tape of that. I hope that my media friends will give me the tape of this premier of your province in the Northwest making this very serious allegation. It's a serious allegation to just stand in a rally and allege that certain individuals are going to stage a coup d'etat of a democratically elected government. It's absolutely irresponsible, in particular when you know that you are playing politics and there is no facts whatsoever. And this must not be taken lightly by South Africa, because this is part and parcel of a deliberate psyching of every South African to identify those who oppose to corruption, who demand unemployment and real economic freedom as enemies of the revolution and enemies of the state and enemies of South Africa, so that their assassination down the line will be seen as a revolutionary act by those who will believe in these conspiracy theories. And we have taken, at least I have taken an exception to that. I want to see the tape, and if indeed that's what he said, he will receive a letter from our lawyers to produce evidence to back the claim that he is making that we are staging a coup.
And quickly, one other thing. Do you feel that Mr. Julius Malema is stealing the march on you?
Was stealing the march?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. The march was clearly led by the public. This was the biggest coalition that we've put together in the post-1994 period. Never, ever did we succeed to get 250 organizations plus endorsing a particular cause, such as to fight against corruption. It has not happened. Of course, political parties will jump into the bandwagon and they will want to steal the show. Accepted in any society. All political parties, by the way, are opportunists. They must be opportunists in order to attract voters in their own direction. All those who are complaining should be in there contesting the space instead of complaining from outside. The EFF saw an opportunity to identify themselves with the objectives of the march. They jumped in, we're not complaining. The DA was there, the COPE and other political parties. We will never chase any political parties, but what we insist on is that this is a civil society initiative. It must remain in the hands of the civil society or else it will be discredited.
Okay, let's ask questions from the floor. Yeah, now we have some action, you know. Lodi, you're right there, thanks.
Mr. Varvey, I'd just like to give some context to some of the things that have come up. Now, you spoke about inequality in South Africa, and our Gini coefficient is 0.65, the highest in the world. But now FirstRand, which employs 38,000 people, we had our own Gini coefficient calculated by Pricewaterhouse. And you know what our Gini coefficient is? Would you think it's higher or lower than the country? Because remember, we've got some very, very highly paid people. The answer is lower. So our Gini coefficient was 0.42, which is similar to America's. Now you ask yourself, why? The answer is all 38,000 people are employed. So our poor Gini coefficient, which is a measure of inequality, is because 36% of the South African's population is unemployed. By definition, you will get a terrible Gini coefficient. It's not possible to get a good one. Then one of the mining companies also had their Gini coefficient calculated. Now you'd think they're not going to be good, blue-collar workers, expensive top management. Wrong. Their Gini coefficient was 0.34, okay, which is similar to Norway and similar to New Zealand. Okay, that was just a perspective on inequality. You are correct that the educated people in this country have benefited more post-democracy than the uneducated. But it's not that they haven't benefited at all. I want to give you one context. So South Africa's total agricultural land value, government figures, 360 billion. Okay? How much do we distribute each year in grants? Child, disability, old age? 130 billion. So, every 3 years, approximately, the entire agricultural value of all land in South Africa is given in rands and cents to the poor. Okay, and I'm not against it, not at all. But I'm just saying, understand what's happening already. Then my final point is this investment strike. It's absolute garbage. If you SA breweries and you're not going to put up a new factory if your current factory is running at 80%. It's not an investment strike, it's sound business sense. And this is a phrase that's thrown out there. There is no such thing as investment strike. Thank you.
So dis sommer net in die algemeen, daar's 'n spesifieke vraag gewees.
Nee, dus ek het net stellings gemaak.
Goed. Waarteen ek gewaarsku, maar in elk geval. Daar's
Sorry.
FNB storie.
Okay.
Daar's hy.
Baie dankie. Ek gaan 'n kort vraagie vra en ek wil dit vir meneer Flip Buys vra. Ons het onlangs in die media gelees van die plan B van solidariteit. Gee ons 'n bietjie meer inligting daaroor asseblief, ook gesien in die lig van 'n toekomsberaad wat eerskomende Saterdag sal plaasvind. Dankie.
Dis 'n bietjie af van die onderwerp, maar ek dink hoop Flip sal dit in verband bring met vakbonde ook. Ja?
Mr. Vavi, your experience recently reminds me of the old byline about a patriot. A patriot is somebody who rejoices when he gets a speeding fine, but that shows him that the system is working. There's some contradictions built into your philosophy, Mr. Vavi. The gentleman in the middle who looks like me said it very aptly just now about ons oorskat die vermoë van die staat om alles te armoede te help and so on. The developmental state, so surely it's capitalistic. It's just the capital is owned by government as opposed to the private sector. But also, it's anti-competitive because it's the state is the big dominant supplier, it's monopolistic. So, how can that possibly be of benefit to bringing benefits, supporting the poor and so on, because it's inherently inefficient. And in South Africa, we just have so many examples of inefficiency by the state in terms of needing big cash bailouts, SAA, Eskom, latest one I see, Infraco, broadband. There's just so many of their legion. And in this province, only this municipality is able to deliver a green drop and blue drop Department of Water and Sanitation every single year. There's not a single other municipality can do it.
But could I just ask, I think Mr. Laurie Dippenaar started a trend here. So if you could get to a point and ask a specific question.
Yeah. Mr. Vavi, the developmental state, do you really think it is going to be a big success, like you say?
What? I'm sorry.
Okay, will be a success. The development state, will it be a success?
Okay.
Okay, do you want to start, first of all, in reacting to the speech? And then the last question?
Let me start with the first question about the Gini coefficient and the inequalities. I will agree that with 35% unemployment rate, which in numbers mean 8.4 million South Africans unemployed, you're bound to have that impacting on your measurement of inequalities. Gini coefficient is a big factor that drives our inequalities in a democracy. For we know if you could put those 8.4 million South Africans in productive activity, working for decent work, they will lift their families up and the inequalities in society will automatically close. But let's not be historical when we articulate that. One of the driving factors in inequalities in South Africa beyond the unemployment is the income inequalities. The fact that in the pay structure of South Africa, the CEOs, and then thanks to the report that we have exposed as Price Waters, we know that now the income inequalities in the manufacturing and private sector is anything between around 1,500 to 2,000 or plus to 2,000. If you look at the salary of the CEOs in South Africa, how much they rake, the CEOs of Shoprite, Checkers, and the banks, is absolutely scary that the people are getting so much when the median salary of South African workers is around 3,000 or so rands. And that's a driving factor to inequalities in South Africa. It's not necessary. Of course, it will be a black and white issue, but it's not necessarily telling the whole story when you say it's a black and white. It will be black and white in the sense that most of the CEOs will still be white, and most of the blue-collar workers will still be black and Africans. So there is a racial component to that. It's no surprise, again, according to the people who do the studies. They show that on average, the average salary of a worker in South Africa, white worker, is 10,000 compared to 6,000 for Indians, and the median salary for black workers is below 3,000. It's not an accident. It's what we're coming from, what we're trying to move away from, a history dominated by racial inequalities as well. But yes, unemployment is a big factor, but it's not only unemployment. It's also driven by unequal access to opportunity, to assets, to education, and so forth and so forth. That's the first point.
Do you believe, like the French economist Thomas Piketty, that there should be a wealth tax?
I do. I have said so from the beginning, and a lot of people backed our assertion that there should have been, as part of reconciliation in South Africa, a wealth tax, a solidarity tax, in order for us to say, by nature, apartheid and colonialism produce these two unequal worlds in one world. One world largely, generally, a black world, and one world largely, and we're generalizing, white work. And we're not saying that every white sitting here belongs to that world naturally because of the color of the skin. We're talking here about class differentials in society. We should have, from that moment, said, for reconciliation to work, we need to copy the examples of what we saw after the fall of the Berlin Wall in Germany. There was a deliberate attempt to ensure that society moves into a one paradigm of better levels of equalities. And they introduced a wealth tax. When we spoke about that, everybody said, stupid socialist, communist, racist, where are you coming from? And yet we all know sitting here that maintaining the current levels of inequalities in society is simply not politically sustainable. There will be a point where the two desperate underclass in society and the poor will start marching to the houses of the rich to demand not too much, just to demand water, to demand food, and to demand the most basic necessities of life. We don't want that. It is not too late for us to embrace wealth tax in South Africa, not too late to talk about solidarity tax of any kind. So there was
I think Mr. Flip Base will really appreciate that, the solidarity tax.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
but the development state, sorry.
Oh, yes.
Development state, if you can just quickly say something about that.
In my view, developmental state means a state that acts in the best interest of society as a whole, not of the select group of society, such as the owners of property. A developmental state have a mandate and have a mindset that says everything is about uplifting the most downtrodden in society, the unemployed, those who are marginalized by the dysfunctional education system, those who are marginalized by a dysfunctional health structure, and those that have no property whatsoever. The state seeks to intervene. And I accept that what I'm talking about sounds like I heard you saying that it's discredited. Look at the state of affairs in our government now and look at what happened in the Soviet Union. That never worked and so forth. It never worked because society did not embrace principles and decided to act in support of the principles. They allowed the powerful in society to distort even the most basic concepts for the benefit of the elite in society, which is already happening in South Africa. SAA, for example, is a biggest airliner in South Africa. It should be making billions for us as taxpayers, and yet it is now an albatross hanging on our necks. You know why? We have allowed the powerful in society to deploy cadres into the SAA that have no experience, no know-how whatsoever to begin to drive that into being the basket case in relation to our tax. Same thing with SABC. Sorry, are they here? SABC, when you allow a multi-billion public broadcasting company to be run by somebody who have no matric, or worst of all, Standard 9, and then to begin to drive it down to be a basket case in the taxpayers as an albatross, don't blame the concept of a need for the public broadcaster. Blame society for allowing the elite to steal the concepts that should empower ordinary people as a whole, and using that to empower the elite who have political connections. I can go on about what is happening in Petro SA, what is happening in ESCOM, and everything.
Cool. I just want to say that I didn't prompt you to say that.
Are you now scared about your job?
Daar's 'n wyse man, een van die grondleggers van die Suid-Afrikaanse ekonomie wat gesê het, jy kan nie veilig slaap as jou buurman honger is nie. So ek stem 100% met meneer Wawie saam, dit is 'n uiterste noodsaaklikheid dat armoede, werkloosheid en al hierdie verbandhoudende vraagstukke opgelos moet word. Anders te gaan jy in 'n ongelykheid, gaan jy 'n baie groot spanning in die gemeenskap kry en mense het nie 'n menswaardige lewe nie. Hulle het lewensverwagting is korter, hulle het nie dieselfde onderwys, hulle kinders dit word voortgesit in die volgende geslag so aan. So daarmee stem ek 100% saam. Die vraag is, hoe gaan jy dit regkry? Nou gelukkig het die geskiedenis oor die afgelope 100 jaar of wat werklike eksperimente uitgevoer waar ons na kan kyk. En as ek 3 voorbeelde kan noem, Oos- en Wes-Duitsland, dis dieselfde mense, dieselfde land, hy is ewe plat geskiet na die wêreldoorlog en binne 40 jaar het die beleid in die een land en die beleid in die ander land het gewys wat se verskil is daar, watter stelsel werk die beste. As jy kyk na Noord- en Suid-Korea en kyk vanaand bietjie of vanmiddag op Google Earth na Noord- en Suid-Korea vanuit die lug, vanuit die ruimte geneem. Kyk vir jouself. Hoe lyk dit? Hoe lyk Suid-Korea? Hoe lyk Noord-Korea? Die deeltjie wat u dink is die see, waar daar nie 'n lig aan in die nag is nie, want daar is nie ekonomie nie. Dit is Noord-Korea. As jy kyk na China en Taiwan, hoe het hulle gelyk? Weet die ekonomiese verskille tussen hulle twee. En wat het gebeur? Wat het dit verander? Dis nie net die wealth tax in Duitsland nie, dit is so, Wes-Duitsland was 'n magtige land, wat die armes kon ryker maak. Maar in baie van hierdie ander lande, met die verkeerde beleid, het hulle net in plaas van om die armes ryker te maak, het hulle die rykes armer gemaak. En met rykes bedoel ek nie die multimiljonêers nie, ek bedoel gewone middelklas mense. Maar, so daardie eksperimente is reeds uitgevoer. Toe China sy ekonomiese beleid beweeg na 'n meer vrye mark, hy maak sy mense vry. Want die sterkste krag vir ontwikkeling is die wil in mense om hulle eie vermoë te verwesenlik, om hulle eie situasie te verbeter. Maar jy moet hulle net vrymaak, jy kan nie vasmaak met al wat 'n wet en 'n regulasie en 'n bepaling is nie. En China het omtrent 500 miljoen mense, 500 miljoen mense, die afgelope 20 jaar uit uiterste armoede gelig. Kyk na Indië, wat 'n politieke demokrasie gehad het, maar sosialistiese ekonomiese ekonomie, wat selfs met voetjie vir voetjie skuiwe het hulle ekonomie begin bevry. Eintlik, wat beteken as ekonomie bevry? Jy bevry die mense in die land. En jy het 250 miljoen mense in Indië oor die afgelope 15 jaar uit armoede uit begin lig. So daai stelsels is daar vir almal om te sien, die resultate is daar vir almal om te sien. Ek glo groter vryheid is die antwoord. Want die strewe, Milton Friedman, met al sy bagasie wat hy het, maar hy het gesê dat wanneer gelykheid in die vorm van gedwonge gelyke uitkomste belangriker word as vryheid, eindig jy sonder vryheid of gelykheid. En dit is hoekom ongelukkig in hierdie stelsels wat ons gesien het in die wêreld, die sosialistiese stelsels, het nie net tot armoede gelei nie, maar het ook tot verdrukking gelei. Want weet regter Jan Stein het gesê dat jy kan nie die ekonomiese dele van sosialisme losmaak van die politieke totalitêre dele daarvan nie. En dit is wat 'n mens bekommer. Net vinnig oor die vraag daar oor ons plan, ek gaan dit baie vinnig hanteer. Ons sê ons moet plan A en plan B volg. Plan A is nou maar die standaard, kom ons sê op die gebied van Afrikaans, om 'n voorbeeld te noem. Jy het 'n plan Suid-Afrikaanse Taalraad in die grondwet, dis 'n waginstelling in terme van artikel 9 is. So jy van hoofstuk 9. So jy het mensdawe die taalwet, jy het baie bepalinge in die grondwet, pragtige bepalinge, maar wat gebeur in die praktyk? Dit werk nie. So wat ons sê is dat natuurlik moet jy nog steeds spansat gebruik in die taalwet en al daai goed en so.
En jou belasting betaal.
En jou belasting betaal. Maar jy moet natuurlik as belastingbetaler, jy kan nie 'n belastingbetaler wees, maar nie 'n diensteontvanger nie. Jy is geregtig op daardie dienste vir die geld, op waarde vir jou belastinggeld. Dit verstaan 'n mens. Maar jy moet ander dinge doen en dit is wat ons sê 'n gemeenskapsplan doen om in hierdie geval wat ek nou genoem het, sê net maar Afrikaans te bevorder. Dis dieselfde met veiligheid, dis ons land se groot probleem. Natuurlik moet jy steeds met die polisie werk, jy moet nog steeds aandring dat die polisie moet doeltreffend wees in al daai goed. Maar jy kan nie net as iemand inbreek sê nee, ek wag vir die polisie nie. Jy sal moet by jou plaaslike buurtwag betrokke raak en dit is hoekom AfriForum hierdie gemeenskapsveiligheidsstrukture in samewerking met die polisie waar enigstens moontlik op 'n wettige basis saam met die sekuriteitsmaatskappye, saam met die ander buurtwagte en wat hulle verantwoordelikheid neem en hulle het aan baie gebiede het hulle ook die taxiverenigings onder andere betrek want mense wil ook die misdaad in die hele land verbeter. Jy wil nie weet die veiligheid. Jy wil nie net in die ou blanke woongebiede nie. So ons probeer waar ons kan swart groeperings betrek want misdaad is ons land is almal se probleem en daarmee hou ons die polisie nog steeds aanspreeklik. Maar plan B is nou maar om self ook verantwoordelikheid te vat vir veiligheid. En daar's geweldig baie dinge wat 'n mens kan doen. Ons het statistieke wat ons kan bewys dit het tot 80 tot selfs tot 90% afgeneem nadat ons hierdie projekte geloods het. Al wat ons wil doen op elkeen van hierdie gebiede binne die raamwerk van die grondwet. Mense dink as iets in die grondwet staan, dan realiseer dit homself. Dit is nie so nie. Dan is dit net 'n papierreg. Jy moet hom realiseer. Jy help nie vryheid van spraak, maar daar bestaan nie media nie. En ons sê net daar is baie regte ingebou. Kom ons neem daai regte op. Kom ons beskerm dit. Kom ons verdedig dit en kom ons werk saam waar ons kan met enige gemeenskap, met die staat waar moontlik. Maar laat ons deel hê, ons kan nie net ons toekoms oorlaat aan meneer Zuma en sy regering nie, ons moet self iets daaraan doen en dit is ons hele plan.
Goed, Pieter, jy moet asseblief nie, as jy wil sê dan moet jy sê.
Okay, wat my interesseer is, ek kry die indruk dat u reaksie is eintlik die planne gaan is 'n reaksie teen die feit dat die staat nie sy job doen nie. Dis wat dit op neerkom en jy wil daai rol speel. Dis halfpad, ja. Die ander ding is die verskil. U sien 'n minder rol vir die staat, meneer Wawie sien 'n groter rol vir die staat. Maar ek dink nie onderskat dat die staat in elk geval 'n rol gaan speel in elke stelsel wat jy moet volg nie. They must create a framework, soos hulle sê. Hulle moet sorg dat daar genoeg opgevoede en vaardighede is vir die werksmag.
Ja.
Hulle moet sorg dat daar rule of law is, soos ek kan sê in Engels. En ek dink dis ons groot probleem op hierdie staat. Die staat kan nie, selfs al is hy nie interventionistiese staat nie, en ons het nie die staat op hierdie stadium het nie die vaardighede of die wil, ek weet nie, om 'n leierskapsrol mee te speel nie, om die basiese goed te sorg dat ons 'n goeie stelsel kan ontwikkel nie. En dit is jammer as die kritiek maar is my.
Ja, is reg.
Nee, ek wil net in kort sê dat die rol van die staat na my mening is die van 'n huishoudster en nie die van 'n broodwinner nie. En die twee maniere hoe ek dink ons van die praktiese maniere hoe ons armoede kan oplos is in die een kant met jou armste mense, as ons kyk na beste praktyke in ander lande, want ons hoef nie die wiel weer te ontwerp nie. In Australië het hulle werk vir welsynstelsel. As jy op die welsynstelsel is, dan moet jy by die plaaslike staatsraad gaan aanmeld, en dan kyk hulle of hulle vir jou werk kan kry, verkieslik binne jou beroep, maar al moet jy die tuine mooier maak, en 4 dae van die week, die 5de dag van die week, mag jy gaan werk soek, of moet jy gaan werk soek, en hulle help hulle jou ook daarmee. Dan leer jy mense vaardighede aan. Jy leer mense ook in netwerke, weet in die werkswêreld leer jy hulle aan. Die meeste van daai mense kry binne 'n bepaalde kort tydjie kry hulle werk. So werk vir welsyn verminder ook net hierdie sindroom van afhanklikheid en gee vir mense ook die trots, want as niks wat mense trots maak as jy voel jy maak 'n verskil nie. So dis aan die een kant, noem dit maar die ekonomiese onderkant. En dan moet ons kyk na die wêreldekonomiese verslag wat hierdie week uitgekom het met gemengde nuus vir Suid-Afrika, maar die nommer 1 of die eerste 3 lande op daardie lys, Switserland, die VSA en dan kan nie die derde een onthou nie, is talentgebaseerde ekonomieë. Singapore, wat gesê het dat hulle is talentgebaseerde ekonomieë wat sê ons moet sorg dat daar mense in die staat is, in die privaat sektor en oral. Ons moet ons beste talent moet ons oral gebruik. Ons moet hulle nie met een of ander wet uit die arbeidsmark hou nie. Ons moet ons talent verder ontwikkel met goeie onderwys en met goeie opleiding, want daar is nie 'n manier in 'n moderne ekonomie as iemand nie 'n behoorlike onderwys het om daardie persoon 'n behoorlike lewe te laat lei nie, want vergoeding op die einde word betaal op grond van bydrae, op grond van produksie en ongelukkig nie op grond van behoefte nie. Daardie stelsel het ongelukkig nie gewerk nie. So dis vir my baie belangrik dat ons 'n talentgebaseerde strategie dan in Suid-Afrika volg. Dit is die oplossing.
Rudolf, die so in die middel. Kom ons hoor net daarso.
Mr. Wawie, I'd just like to know your vision of what a socialist state in South Africa would look like. I mean, as things stand, 85% of the tax is already paid by the top decile of income earners. The rest is paid by corporates on the profits that they try to make. private sector fixed investment is 4 times the size of that of government as we speak. The employment by the private sector is 4 times that of government. South Africa runs a current account deficit. That means we are beholden unto the rest of the world to fund it for us. We need foreign capital. We need foreigners to think that this is a country in which profits can be made. So my question to you would be, is business then really sort of the enemy? How do you see the relationship between the state or government and the private sector? And then just a passing shot on, you mentioned Mr. Piketty. He has denounced socialism. I mean, he is for a wealth tax, and I can understand some of his reasoning for that, but he is no socialist. He also says that the market economy is the best allocator of resources in the economy, and he certainly doesn't want economies to abandon the market-based system. So my question to you would be, and it really touches on what much of Flip was saying, you know, what sort of role is there then for us in the private sector? And just a final quick point. The idea of there being something like white monopoly capital, I've actually never understood. I mean, the group that I work for, just about all the shares are owned by pension funds of workers. So, I mean, it does not belong, you know, there isn't like this little group of capitalists that run the economy. The shares are widely dispersed right across the economy. It belongs to the people. So I'd like us to rather see the government and the private sector as not seeing each other as enemies, but as, you know, working towards a common good, which you expounded so well at the outset. Man.
Thank you. And right there at the back, and I think that let's hear where we get after that. Yes.
Yes, my name is Kokorito. I want to ask all of the guests there a simple question that we are facing here in Potchefstroom. In Potchefstroom, we are facing a situation where the MDB, the Municipal Demarcation Board, has merged Vennesdorp and Potchefstroom by force without consulting the society. So I've heard the speaker say that they encourage a society that will resolve things peacefully and in a way that is non-violent. Our premier in the radio mentioned it that whether we like it or not, Vennesdorp and Potchefstroom, they're gonna be merged and be called JB Max Municipality. So I'd like to know from both of you guys, in a situation like this, where your own government is bullying you, is forcing you, and is bringing instructions that you can't even swallow, what we must do. And then, as an individual, I will remind one phrase from the late Nelson Mandela. When the ANC government is doing to you what the apartheid government did to you, you must do the very same thing that you did to the apartheid government. Smash it. So we can't smash the ANC government by talking to them, because we have tried with this thing of the demarcation issue by writing petitions, going to communities before applying for a march on the 11th of last month. So I just wanted to know, when we go for a peaceful resolutions and people don't listen, because it seems like it's a culture here in South Africa that a tire must burn for someone to listen.
Okay, thank you very much. It's not really related to the issue, but I don't know whether you want to answer. So quickly, just as, okay? Yes, Mr. Bowman?
No, I still have matters arising with you. I just want to settle the issue about whether there is an investment strike by corporations in South Africa or not. I just want to quote just 2 paragraphs, bear with me, from an article written by somebody I don't want to profile, because I don't agree with him on too many other issues. But this is what I think is important in terms of what he said. He said, in 1909, the U.S. Congress adopted corporate income tax aimed at discouraging companies from hoarding cash, which slows economies. Congress put up a 15% penalty tax on excessive hoards of cash. And in 1986, the law was relaxed to exclude cash held overseas. That's a statement. But in South Africa, bank cash reserves above those of the Reserve Bank total at approximately 1 trillion cash reserves, 1 trillion rands. The Reserve Bank reported a lesser figure of 700 billion in corporate deposits in South African banks by August 2015. And let's say this, about 549 billion has been sitting on the balance sheets of corporations since 2006. This accounts for about 20% of the country's GDP going unused. I call that an investment strike. Others will say, no, it's because corporations are not seeing investment opportunities, there's chaos. That's the conversation I said that South Africa must have about what should be the role of business sector in building a new South Africa where all stand to benefit, not only themselves and the shareholders. If you look at those figures alone, we would have been so much down the line in creating jobs that we need in this country, just using the figures that are sitting idling, not being invested back into the active or to the productive economy. That's my first question. In relation to the second question, which was now?
That was about Potch. That's not really related.
No. The host asked a question. What was? Oh yes. What is what is that I'm talking about? Again, let me just start with the defensive. Every time the world hears the word socialist, people say, oh no, where do these people live? Where are they coming from? Because they have the image of the Soviet Union, and they have the image of the Eastern Europe, they have the image of failing state-owned enterprises in South Africa, and they ask a question, how dare does anybody suggest that we go to the same route? And they forget the point that I was making earlier, Flip, that a lot of times we react to the failures, to the distortions, to the manipulations by the elites for the benefit of themselves, instead of embracing concepts that were designed for the benefit of the society as a whole. Let me make an example about the most popular, referred to, hated, and loved in South Africa, transformation. In my view, I think we are allowing the word transformation to be hijacked again by the elites in society for the benefit of the elites and not for the benefit of ordinary people. Let's just start on unpacking that. From sport to workplaces, transformation to everything, we have allowed something that was meant to benefit the ordinary people in the streets to be transformed in our eyes, hijacked by the eloquent for the benefit of themselves instead of for the benefit of ordinary people. So in relation to, for example, a developmental state, I would want a developmental state that have capacity, that have trained personnel, that can enter into genuine partnerships with the private sector. By the way, I'm not talking about a state where private property is banned and that it becomes a sin to own any property. I accept that even in a socialist future, there will always be a role for the market forces to develop and to prosper, but that will be done under a simple rule, that should not happen at the expense of the interest of ordinary people, be they for better pay or for the whether that is for the environment that is protected, and so forth and so forth. So I'm not looking at a socialist future where there will be no markets, where there will only be a state, and where there will be nothing else moving except bureaucrats moving A, B, C, D, and machinery in the state. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a mixed economy where there is a stronger role for the state on the basis of ensuring that we socialize the means of the production as far as it is possible to do so, in terms of ensuring that ordinary workers, not the elites and the most powerful politically, ordinary people have a stake in the economy that they can control to the benefit of themselves and the society as a whole, as against a system that is totally dominated by the market logic, where ordinary people only become slaves to the owner, to the property class, to their disadvantage. In this sense, for us to see more inequalities, more poverty, and so forth, and the destruction of environment. So that's what I'm talking about, not some utopian thing that will never work and have never worked anywhere else in the world.
Okay, Flip Base, you have some contacts with Potchefstroom.
Ja,
Perhaps
seker.
you can help to address the concern.
Ja, seker, ek kan na die tyd kan ek miskien bietjie meer met hom praat. Ek dink die kern wat hy van praat, wat hy op wys is die gevaar van sentralisering. En as jy kyk na die kernrede hoekom sentralisering in die algemeen nie kan werk nie, is dat die hoofrede hoekom die Sowjetunie geval het, was omdat die bureaukratiese sentralisme van die Sowjetstelsel kon nie standhou teen die desentraliserende impak van die nuwe ekonomie en van die moderne mens nie. Nou hierdie sentraliseringsneiging wat hy daarvan gepraat het, is tipies van die probleem in Suid-Afrika en dit is deel van die probleem en nie van die oplossing nie. My siening is, as jy ontevrede is daarmee en jy voel demokratiese metodes werk nie, gebruik meer demokratiese metodes, stem vir 'n oppositieparty.
All right, so I hope you understood that. Mr. Barbe, do you want to say something very short and to the point about Potchefstroom, about Lukwe? The demarcation board and their decision to actually combine the two towns, Ventersdorp and Potchefstroom.
By the way, I'm sure everybody listening would have heard the sentiment that I was speaking about, that people believe that unless you ban something, you will not be listened to. And it's a very dangerous route we're going to in the country, and I hope that at some point everybody will listen to those voices of the young people so that we don't march all of us into that direction. The point that I'm raising is that any decision taken above the heads of ordinary people who are going to be affected by those people will be eventually resisted by the people. And I've seen marches here in Tlokwe as well as in Ventersdorp about the decisions of the demarcation board imposed as the law on ordinary people. Anything that is not democratic will not take us anywhere. The decisions about what is being demarcated for what logical, political, economic logic must be a product of a democratic process and engaging with the people concerned. But once you act above as the Messiah, some God on earth, and on behalf of the people that are supposed to be just ruled by the rulers, you're going to have resistance.
Ek dink die probleem het gekom dat ons word regeer deur 'n stelsel van regering oor die mense in plaas van regering deur die mense.
En vir die mense. Net ten slotte, het jy so 'n opsomming vir ons wat jy wil gee of net 'n laaste gedagte?
Wat my net interesseer is, ek is 'n produk van die 80 jare, ek het kollektiewe bedingings hier ontwikkel en ek het gesien en wat ek dink is gebeur het dat die gewone werkers wat werk het en wat vakbonde behoort en ek amper 'n ekonomiese elite geword het. Hulle het die jobs, die Gini coefficient is daar redelik laag. Ons groot probleem is kollektiewe bedinging kon nie die werklooses help. Want ek dink die kollektiewe bedinging en die verhoging in lone het bygedra, nie heeltemal nie, maar bygedra tot werkloosheid. En dis vir my as 'n persoon wat kollektiewe bedinging ondersteun het oor die jare, want dit kan nie help om werkloosheid te help nie. We created, so to say, an economic elite of unionized workers, basically. I think Mr. Varvey will disagree, but I think that's the point.
Sodat die vakbonde ook 'n groter rol moet speel in die skepping van werk en die groei van die ekonomie.
Ja, dis reg, ja.
Goed. Baie dankie aan julle. Ons tyd is nou min of meer verby, so ons moet nou klaar maak. Baie dankie dat julle 'n bietjie geduld met ons gehad het, ook oor die klankprobleme wat ons gehad het. Thank you very much to our viewers on the internet. Much appreciated. We have a discussion tomorrow again. Môre gaan dit oor moedertaalonderrig. En ek dink dit hou nogal verband met al die drama wat ons het hier so op Potchefstroom met die universiteit, by Stellenbosch en ook in ander dele van die land. Moedertaalonderwys môre, so sien julle 8:30. Alles van die beste. Mooi bly.
Thank you very much. I found you two very